Sherlock Holmes and the Conspiracy of Silver Iris. Chapter 1. The Enigma of the Silver Iris. It was on a dreary morning in November, as a dense fog clung to the cobbled streets of London, that a peculiar case came into our lives at 221B Baker Street. The fire in our hearth did little to chase away the damp chill that crept through the windows, and I was contentedly perusing the columns of the Times, when a sudden rap at the door announced an unexpected visitor. Holmes, stretched languidly on the settee with his pipe between his lips, raised an eyebrow at the sound, but made no move to rise. "If you would, Watson," he murmured, his sharp grey eyes fixed upon the ceiling. "I dare say this will be of interest." I rose to oblige, and as I opened the door, I was met by a young woman, her face pale with worry, and her gloved hands trembling slightly. She stepped hesitantly into the room, her eyes darting from me to Holmes with a mixture of trepidation and hope. "Pray do sit down," I said, pulling forward a chair for her. "You have come to consult Mr. Sherlock Holmes, have you not?" "Indeed," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am at my wit's end and have been told that he is the only man in London who can aid me." Holmes, who had been observing her with his characteristically penetrating gaze, now sat upright. He gestured for her to proceed. "Miss Farnsworth," she supplied. "Edith Farnsworth." "Miss Farnsworth, you appear to have come from the south of London," Holmes began, "and judging by the faint traces of ink on your fingers, you are employed as a secretary or in some clerical capacity. Your profession, I dare say, requires you to work late into the evening, as evidenced by the dark circles under your eyes." The young woman's eyes widened. "Why, yes, Mr. Holmes. I work as a secretary for Mr. Hawthorne, a botanist of some repute." She hesitated, then withdrew a small package from her handbag. "It is this that has driven me to seek your counsel." She unwrapped the package to reveal a single flower, a silver iris of extraordinary beauty. Its petals shimmered with an almost metallic sheen, and it exuded a faint, sweet fragrance that filled the room. "A remarkable specimen," Holmes remarked, leaning forward to examine it. "And this was sent to you?" "Yes, sir. It arrived 3 days ago, along with this note." She handed him a slip of paper, upon which was scrawled in an elegant hand, beneath, "Beauty lies betrayal." Holmes studied the note intently, then turned his attention back to the flower. "An unusual gesture, Miss Farnsworth. Have you any notion as to its meaning?" She shook her head. "None, Mr. Holmes. At first, I thought it might be a romantic overture, but—" She faltered, her expression troubled. "The words on the note are far from loving, and now I cannot shake the feeling that this flower is some kind of warning." "Warnings, Miss Farnsworth, come in many forms," Holmes said thoughtfully, turning the flower over in his hands. "But I must ask, is there any reason someone might wish to harm or intimidate you?" "None that I can think of," she replied. "I live a quiet life and have no quarrels with anyone, but—" She hesitated again. "There is something peculiar I ought to mention. My employer, Dr. Hawthorne, has been rather agitated of late. He has received several unusual visitors in the past fortnight, and their conversations have been conducted in hushed tones behind closed doors." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And these visitors, did you observe them closely?" "Only in passing," she admitted. "They were well-dressed gentlemen, but their manner was furtive, as though they did not wish to be seen." Holmes leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Doctor, Hawthorne, you say, is a botanist of some repute. What field does he specialize in?" "Exotic plants," she answered. "He has a particular interest in rare flowers from the East and South America. The silver iris, in fact, is one of his prized specimens." "Ah," said Holmes, his tone sharpening. "So this flower may not be as innocuous as it appears. Tell me, Miss Farnsworth, has Dr. Hawthorne expressed any concern about theft or rivals?" "He has," she said. "Last week he discovered that one of his rare orchids had gone missing, and he was quite distressed about it. But he refused to notify the authorities, saying that it would draw unwanted attention." Holmes nodded, his expression inscrutable. "This matter warrants further investigation. Watson, fetch my magnifying glass, if you please." I retrieved the instrument, and Holmes subjected both the flower and the note to a meticulous examination. He sniffed the flower, then held it to the light, observing the faint traces of pollen on its petals. He scrutinized the note, his brow furrowing as he detected something on its surface. "A curious affair," he muttered. "The ink is of a type commonly used in official correspondence, and there are minute indentations on the paper, suggesting that the writer pressed heavily while composing the note. As for the flower, its provenance is evident, but the question remains, why send such a specimen, and to what end?" Miss Farnsworth's anxiety seemed to deepen as Holmes spoke. "Do you believe I am in danger, Mr. Holmes?" "It is too early to say," he replied. "But I shall endeavour to uncover the truth. For now I advise you to remain vigilant, and report any further developments to me immediately." As she rose to leave, Holmes added, "And Miss Farnsworth, take care not to share the details of this matter with anyone, not even your employer. Discretion may prove to be your greatest safeguard." After she departed, Holmes turned to me with a look of quiet satisfaction. "Well, Watson, what do you make of it?" "A peculiar business," I admitted, "but I fail to see the connection between the flower and Miss Farnsworth's employer." "Ah, but the connection is there, I assure you," Holmes said, lighting his pipe. "The silver iris is no mere trinket. It is a deliberate message, one calculated to elicit fear or provoke action. The question is, who sent it, and why?" As he spoke, his eyes gleamed with the fire of a man who had caught the scent of a trail. I knew then that this case would lead us into yet another labyrinth of intrigue, where danger and deception lurked at every turn. What neither of us could foresee was how deep the mystery would run, or how deadly the consequences would prove to be. Chapter 2. A Macabre Discovery. The following morning dawned as grey and sullen as the last, with a pall of mist still clinging to the city like a shroud. Holmes, having risen unusually early, was deep in thought over the silver iris and the cryptic note left in our possession. I had barely begun to speculate aloud about Miss Farnsworth's peculiar visit when Mrs. Hudson entered, bearing a telegram. Holmes seized it eagerly, his sharp eyes scanning its contents. "Ah," he said, setting the paper down, "it appears our tranquil morning is to be disrupted, Watson. Lord Alistair Bentley has been found dead in his study, and the circumstances are most intriguing. Inspector Lestrade requests our immediate assistance." I hurriedly dressed, and within the hour we were rattling through the damp streets in a hansom cab. Holmes sat in silence, his face set in that familiar expression of intense concentration that always heralded the unravelling of some knotty problem. Upon our arrival at St. James's Square, we found the Bentley household in turmoil, with constables stationed at the gates and a throng of curious onlookers gathered beyond. Lestrade met us at the door, his usual brusque manner tempered by a certain unease. "A nasty piece of work, this," he said, as he led us inside. "Lord Bentley was discovered early this morning by his valet. The door was locked from the inside, and there's no sign of forced entry. But it's what was left behind that's most unsettling." We were ushered into the study. A richly appointed room with dark wood panelling and shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. The body of Lord Bentley lay slumped over his desk, his head resting on a blotter stained with blood. Holmes stepped forward immediately, his keen gaze sweeping the scene. A single silver iris rested on the desk, its shimmering petals stark against the crimson backdrop. Pinned beneath the flower was a note bearing the words, "To see is to suffer." A singular choice of words, Holmes murmured, lifting the note delicately with his gloved hand. And remarkably consistent with the missive delivered to Miss Farnsworth, the connection grows more intriguing. "What connection?" Lestrade demanded. "Is this not simply the work of some lunatic with a penchant for flowers?" Holmes ignored the question, his attention fixed on the desk. He bent to examine a small, broken object lying near the body, the remnants of a wax seal, its edges still clinging to a fragment of parchment. "An interrupted correspondence, perhaps," he mused. "And what of the window, Lestrade?" "I see it is slightly ajar." "The window's latch is broken," Lestrade admitted. "But there's no sign that anyone entered or exited that way. The grounds were searched thoroughly." Holmes crouched by the window, inspecting the sill and the floor beneath it. "Interesting," he said softly, running a finger along a faint smear of wax on the wood. "This tells a tale, though perhaps not the one we expect." He straightened abruptly and turned his attention to the body itself. "Watson, if you please. Your medical expertise will be invaluable here." I stepped forward, suppressing a shudder as I examined the corpse. "The wound is a single clean cut to the throat," I reported, "likely inflicted with a blade of exceptional sharpness. Death would have been swift." "And the time of death?" Holmes prompted. "Judging by the state of rigor mortis and the coolness of the body, I would estimate it occurred around midnight." "Precisely what I expected," Holmes said, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Tell me, Lestrade, was anything taken from the room?" "Not as far as we can tell," the inspector replied. "Lord Bentley's personal effects appear undisturbed. The room was locked from the inside, as I mentioned, and the key was found in his pocket." "A locked room mystery, then," Holmes said, his tone one of quiet satisfaction. "But one with a solution that will soon be evident. Watson, observe the arrangement of the desk. Notice anything peculiar?" I studied the scene closely. "The inkstand has been overturned," I said, "and the papers beneath it are smudged. The blotter, too, shows signs of a hasty motion." "Precisely," Holmes said. "Lord Bentley was writing something at the time of the attack. The interruption was sudden and violent, but the question remains, what was he writing, and why?" As we pondered this, a maid entered with trembling hands to deliver a curious item to Lestrade, a small folded piece of paper found in Lord Bentley's bedroom. It was addressed simply to C.M. and contained a brief, cryptic message. "Our secret must remain buried." "A curious turn," Holmes remarked. "Lestrade, I suggest you investigate the identity of this C.M. at once. Meanwhile, I shall examine the origins of our floral clue." Lestrade looked dubious, but nodded. "And what about the valet?" he asked. "Should we question him further?" "By all means," Holmes replied. "But do so with care. Servants often know more than they reveal, though extracting the truth requires a delicate touch." Our work at the Bentley residence concluded for the moment, Holmes and I returned to Baker Street. The image of the silver iris haunted me, its shimmering petals a stark contrast to the blood-stained blotter upon which it had rested. Holmes, however, seemed invigorated, his mind clearly alight with possibilities. "Watson," he said, as we settled back into our sitting room, We are dealing with an adversary of no ordinary cunning. This is not the work of a mere madman. It is the calculated effort of a mind steeped in methodical malice. The question is, what connects Lord Bentley to the Silver Iris, and how does Miss Farnsworth's enigmatic visitor fit into the picture? I could offer no satisfactory answer, and Holmes did not press me further. Instead, he spent the remainder of the day poring over botanical references, consulting volumes that seemed to contain an endless catalogue of rare and exotic flora. By nightfall, he had made an important discovery. "The silver iris, Watson, is not merely a rare bloom," he announced. "It is a symbol of wealth and exclusivity, cultivated by only a handful of botanists in all of England. Its presence at the scene of the crime is no coincidence. It is a deliberate message. The question is, what does it signify?" The answer to that question remained elusive, but I could sense that Holmes was on the cusp of some breakthrough. As we retired for the night, I could not help but feel a growing unease, as though the silver iris were a harbinger of further darkness yet to come. It was a feeling I could not shake, and as events would soon prove, it was not without justification. Chapter 3. A Whisper of Scandal. The Bentley affair, though steeped in tragedy, had only begun to unravel its web of mystery when Holmes and I found ourselves once again immersed in the shadowed corners of London's high society. It was late afternoon when we received an invitation, delivered in haste by a liveried footman, to attend a gathering at the home of Lady Eugenia Darlington. A name synonymous with opulence, Lady Darlington was renowned for hosting salons that brought together the most influential figures of the city. Holmes, his eyes alight with intrigue, saw in this event an opportunity to probe the circles in which Lord Bentley had moved. "Do you expect we shall find answers in a drawing-room, Holmes?" I asked, somewhat sceptical as we prepared for the evening. "The answers, Watson, are often whispered behind fans or concealed within the knowing glances exchanged across a ballroom. High society hides its sins with a veneer of civility, but rest assured the truth will out," he replied, fastening his collar with deliberate precision. Lady Darlington's residence was an exquisite Georgian townhouse, its windows aglow with the golden light of 100 gas lamps. We arrived to find the place thrumming with the hum of conversation and the soft strains of a string quartet. Holmes, with his unerring ability to blend into any setting, moved effortlessly through the crowd, his sharp eyes darting from one face to another as if cataloguing the secrets hidden behind their carefully curated facades. It was not long before we were introduced to Mrs. Clara Moorcroft, a widow of striking beauty whose name had already surfaced in our inquiries. She greeted us with a practised smile, though I noted a flicker of something, perhaps unease or recognition, as Holmes's piercing gaze settled upon her. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance, though I must confess the presence of London's foremost detective at such an event is both a surprise and a curiosity." "The pleasure is ours, Mrs. Moorcroft," Holmes replied, his tone polite yet probing. "I trust you knew Lord Bentley well?" The question, though seemingly innocuous, caused a shadow to pass over her features. She recovered quickly, but not before I saw her hand tighten on the stem of her champagne flute. "We were acquaintances?" she said lightly. "Lord Bentley was a charming man, though prone to certain excesses. I imagine his untimely death has cast a pall over many in this room." "Indeed," Holmes said, his expression inscrutable. "It is a tragedy that raises many questions. For instance, were you aware of his recent interest in exotic botany?" Mrs. Moorcroft's composure faltered for the briefest of moments. "Botany? No, I cannot say that I was. Such pursuits seem rather far removed from Lord Bentley's usual inclinations." Curious, Holmes remarked, for it appears that a particular flower, the silver iris, played a role in his final moments. You have not, by chance, encountered such a specimen? I have not, she said, her voice cool but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I must attend to my other guests. As she departed, Holmes turned to me with a faint smile. Did you notice her reaction, Watson? It was as if she were caught in a sudden draught. Mrs. Moorcroft is a woman accustomed to veiling her thoughts, yet even she could not entirely conceal her discomfort at the mention of the silver iris. Do you believe she is implicated? I asked. It is too early to say, he replied, but she is certainly entwined in the threads of this mystery. Let us observe her further. The evening progressed, and Holmes's subtle inquiries revealed a tapestry of rumours and half-truths. Lord Bentley, it seemed, had been entangled in a liaison with Mrs. Moorcroft, a connection that was whispered of in tones of both envy and censure. Yet there was more. Murmurings of financial entanglements, of secret investments, and disputes among a select group of gentlemen. The name of Sir Edwin Harper surfaced repeatedly, a philanthropist with a reputation for discretion and a known associate of both Bentley and Dr. Hawthorne. Holmes, ever perceptive, noted these connections with evident satisfaction. "The plot thickens, Watson," he said, as we took our leave. "It appears that Lord Bentley's life was far more complex than it seemed, and Mrs. Moorcroft is but one piece of a larger puzzle." The following day our investigations led us to Sir Edwin Harper's residence, a stately home that exuded an air of quiet wealth. Sir Edwin, a man of advanced years and solemn demeanour, received us in his study. He listened patiently as Holmes outlined the purpose of our visit. "Lord Bentley was a dear friend," Sir Edwin said, his voice tinged with sorrow. "His death is a terrible loss. I cannot fathom who would wish him harm. And yet, Sir Edwin, harm has come to him," Holmes said. "Do you recall any disputes or dealings that might shed light on this matter?" Sir Edwin hesitated, then said, "There were disagreements, I suppose, though nothing of serious consequence. Bentley had a fiery temper, but he was a good man at heart." "And what of his interest in exotic botany?" Holmes pressed. The question seemed to startle Sir Edwin. "Botany, I am aware of no such interest. He had little patience for such pursuits." "Curious," Holmes remarked, "for it was a flower, the silver iris, that was left at the scene of his death. Have you encountered such a bloom?" Sir Edwin shook his head. "No, Mr. Holmes, I have not. But if you believe it significant, I shall do what I can to assist you." As we departed, Holmes was silent, his expression pensive. It was not until we were ensconced once more in our sitting-room at Baker Street that he spoke. "The threads of this case are becoming clearer, Watson," he said, pacing the room. "Lord Bentley's life was a tangle of passions and intrigues, and at its heart lies the silver iris. Its significance eludes me still, but mark my words, it is the key to this entire affair. Mrs. Moorcroft, Sir Edwin, and perhaps even Dr. Hawthorne, they are all players in this drama, though their roles remain to be determined." I could not help but marvel at the breadth of Holmes's deductions, even as the enigma of the silver iris loomed ever larger. The whispers of scandal and the shadow of betrayal had cast their pall over the case, and it was clear that the darkness had yet to reach its full depth. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Garden. The November fog that had so persistently clung to London showed no sign of abating, as Holmes and I journeyed to the home of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne. Situated on the outskirts of the city, the botanist's estate was a striking contrast to the urban sprawl we had left behind. High stone walls encircled the property, and as we approached the gate, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled the air. Beyond the iron bars, we glimpsed the sprawling gardens for which Dr. Hawthorne was renowned, their once vivid blooms now faded with the season. "A man's garden, Watson," Holmes remarked, "often reflects his temperament." "Let us hope, Doctor. Hawthorne's interests lie solely in horticulture, and not in more sinister pursuits." The gate creaked open at the touch of Holmes's hand, and we made our way up a winding path to the main house. The door was answered by a middle-aged servant, whose expression betrayed no emotion beyond professional courtesy. He ushered us into a drawing-room where the good doctor awaited. Dr. Hawthorne was a wiry man of perhaps 50 years, his thinning hair combed back meticulously. His hands, calloused and bearing the faint stains of soil, bespoke a lifetime spent in the service of his passion. He rose to greet us, his sharp eyes alight with curiosity. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice clipped and precise. "I was informed of your visit by Miss Farnsworth. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Holmes did not respond immediately. Instead, he allowed his gaze to wander about the room, taking in the various curiosities that adorned the shelves, pressed flowers mounted in glass cases, botanical sketches rendered with almost scientific precision, and a peculiar array of vials containing powders and tinctures of unknown origin. "Your collection is most impressive, Doctor." "Hawthorne," Holmes said at last. "But it is a particular specimen that brings us here today, the silver iris." A flicker of something passed over Hawthorne's face. Whether surprise or discomfort, it was difficult to say. He gestured for us to sit, taking his own place in a high-backed chair near the hearth. "The silver iris," he repeated slowly. "A rare and beautiful flower, to be sure. What interest does it hold for you, Mr. Holmes?" "It was found at the scene of Lord Bentley's murder," Holmes replied, bluntly. "And another specimen was delivered to your secretary, Miss Farnsworth, along with a most unsettling note. It seems your prized bloom has become entwined in a web of intrigue." Hawthorne's fingers tightened on the armrests of his chair. "I can assure you, Mr. Holmes, that I had no part in such affairs. The silver iris is a delicate plant, one that requires great care to cultivate. I have only a handful of specimens, and they are kept under lock and key in my greenhouse." "Perhaps you would permit us to inspect the greenhouse?" Holmes asked. Hawthorne hesitated, then rose. "Very well. Follow me." We followed him through the house and out into the garden. The greenhouse stood at the far end of the property, its glass panes streaked with condensation. Hawthorne unlocked the door with a heavy iron key, and we stepped into a world of verdant abundance. Exotic plants from every corner of the globe crowded the space, their vibrant colors and heady aromas creating a disorienting effect. "Here," Hawthorne said, leading us to a corner where the silver iris stood in a row of neatly arranged pots. Their metallic petals glimmered even in the dim light, a testament to their unnatural beauty. Holmes crouched to examine them more closely. He took a small lens from his pocket, studying the soil, the leaves, and the faint markings on the pots themselves. After several minutes he straightened. "I notice you use a rather distinctive soil mixture, Doctor." "Hawthorne," he said. "A combination of loam, sand, and peat moss, is it not?" Hawthorne nodded. "It is a blend I developed specifically for the silver iris. It mimics the conditions of its native habitat." "Curious," Holmes murmured, "for I found traces of this same mixture on the windowsill of Lord Bentley's study." The doctor's face darkened. "Are you suggesting that I suggest nothing," Holmes interrupted. "I merely observe. Tell me, Doctor." "Hawthorne, have you had any recent visitors who might have shown an unusual interest in the silver iris?" Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. There was one, he admitted. A man claiming to be a collector of rare plants. He was persistent in his desire to purchase a specimen, but I refused. The silver iris is not for sale. And this man, did he leave his name? He called himself Mr. Graves, Hawthorne said. But whether that is his true name, I cannot say. There was something unsettling about him. His interest in the flower seemed almost obsessive. Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression thoughtful. One final question, Dr. Hawthorne. Have you experienced any thefts or disturbances in your greenhouse? Hawthorne hesitated. A week ago, one of my orchids went missing. It was an unusual specimen, but not as valuable as the silver iris. I assumed it was a simple act of vandalism. Assumptions, Dr. Hawthorne, are often the enemy of clarity, Holmes said. I thank you for your time and your candor, Watson. I believe we have learned all we can here. As we made our way back to Baker Street, I could see that Holmes's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the case. The name, Mr. Graves, and the missing orchid had added new dimensions to the mystery, though their significance remained elusive. What do you make of it, Holmes? I asked, as we stepped into our sitting room. Doctor, Hawthorne is a man of science, but he is not without his secrets, Holmes replied. The traces of soil on Lord Bentley's windowsill and the mention of this mysterious Mr. Graves suggest that the silver iris is more than a mere flower. It is a symbol, Watson, one that points to a deeper conspiracy. The theft of the orchid, too, may prove to be a thread worth following. For now we must wait and watch. The game, as they say, is afoot. As Holmes lit his pipe and settled into his chair, I could not help but feel a growing sense of foreboding. The shadows in Dr. Hawthorne's garden seemed to stretch far beyond the greenhouse, reaching into the dark recesses of London's high society. Whatever secrets the silver iris concealed, they were certain to lead us into ever greater peril. Chapter 5. The Second Murder. The events of the following day plunged us deeper into the heart of the mystery surrounding the silver iris. The air of unease that had settled over Baker Street the previous evening had scarcely lifted when Inspector Lestrade arrived at our door, his face pale and drawn. "Another murder, Holmes," he announced grimly as he stepped into our sitting room. "Mrs. Clara Moorcroft has been found dead in her home, and I'll be damned if the details aren't as chilling as those of Lord Bentley's case." Holmes, who had been lounging in his chair with a cigarette balanced between his fingers, sprang to his feet at once. "Mrs. Moorcroft," he repeated, "this grows ever more curious. Tell me, Lestrade, were there any peculiarities at the scene?" Lestrade hesitated, as if struggling to find the words. "It's the same blasted flower, Holmes, another of those silver irises left on her dressing table. And a note, too. It reads, 'Lies bloom where trust withers.'" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Fascinating," he murmured. "And the manner of her death?" "A knife, this time," Lestrade said. "A single stab to the heart, clean and precise, just like the Bentley case. The door was locked from the inside and the windows were bolted shut. If there's a pattern here, I'll be damned if I can see it." Holmes said nothing more, but the intensity of his expression spoke volumes. Within minutes, we were on our way to Mrs. Moorcroft's residence, a modest, yet elegantly furnished house on the southern edge of London. As we arrived, the scene was much the same as it had been at Lord Bentley's. A constable stationed at the door, a gaggle of curious neighbours murmuring in the street, and an oppressive silence hanging over the house itself. The bedroom where Mrs. Moorcroft had met her end was a picture of domestic tranquillity marred by sudden violence. She lay upon the floor near the dressing-table, her face serene in death, as though she had been taken by surprise. The silver iris, its metallic petals gleaming faintly in the morning light, rested upon a folded note. Holmes moved with swift precision, examining every detail of the scene. He studied the angle of the knife wound, the placement of the flower, and the faint smudges of dust on the floorboards. At length he turned to Lestrade. "Do you notice anything peculiar about the dressing table?" he asked. Lestrade frowned. "Nothing out of the ordinary, Holmes. It's a woman's dressing table, plain as day." "On the contrary," Holmes said, pointing to the edge of the table, "observe the faint scratches here. They suggest that something, a box, perhaps, was recently removed. And these marks on the floor indicate that the chair was moved with some force." Lestrade's brow furrowed. "Are you suggesting someone was searching for something?" "Precisely," Holmes replied. "The question is, what were they looking for, and did they find it?" He turned his attention to the note. Unfolding it carefully, he scrutinized the handwriting, his keen eyes taking in every detail. "The same hand as the previous note," he said. "Elegant, deliberate, and faintly suggestive of a continental education. Tell me, Lestrade, was anything else disturbed in the house?" "Not that we've found," Lestrade said. "Whoever did this was precise, just like before. No mess, no signs of struggle." "A professional, then," Holmes said, "and one who knew exactly what they were about." As Holmes continued his examination, I found my gaze drawn to the silver iris. Its strange, almost otherworldly beauty seemed incongruous in the grim setting of the murder scene. I could not help but feel that the flower itself was a clue, though its meaning remained frustratingly elusive. At length Holmes straightened. "We have learned much here, Watson, though the full significance of these details is not yet apparent. Lestrade, I must trouble you to investigate Mrs. Moorcroft's recent correspondence. Look for any letters, notes, or receipts that might shed light on her associations." Lestrade nodded. "And what will you be doing, Holmes?" Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "I shall be pursuing a different thread of the tapestry, one that leads us to the heart of this conspiracy. Come, Watson, we have much to discuss." Back at Baker Street, Holmes's mood was one of quiet intensity. He paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he spoke. "The murders of Lord Bentley and Mrs. Moorcroft are linked not only by the silver iris, but by the deliberate manner in which they were carried out. The locked doors, the precision of the killings, and the cryptic notes all point to a mind of exceptional cunning. Yet there is more here than mere method. There is motive, and that motive, Watson, lies in the connections between our victims." "But what connection exists between Lord Bentley and Mrs. Moorcroft?" I asked. "Aside from their acquaintance in high society, I can see none." Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on the window. "Their connection, Watson, may not lie in their public lives, but in their private dealings. Lord Bentley's involvement in the trading company we uncovered was no coincidence, and Mrs. Moorcroft's reaction to the silver iris suggests she, too, was entangled in its affairs. The question is, what did they know, and why was it worth killing for?" Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. It was a messenger delivering a small package addressed to Holmes. He opened it carefully, revealing a single, dried silver iris pressed between the pages of an old ledger. The ledger itself was stamped with the insignia of the defunct trading company we had uncovered days earlier. Holmes's eyes gleamed with excitement as he leafed through the pages. "Here it is, Watson," he said. "Proof of transactions that link our victims to a web of financial intrigue. These entries correspond to the names of prominent individuals, including Sir Edwin Harper and Dr. Hawthorne. It seems our trading company was more than it appeared." "But what does this mean for the case?" I asked. "It means, Watson, that we are dealing with a conspiracy rooted in greed and betrayal. The silver iris is not merely a symbol, it is a message to those who have crossed a line, a warning, or perhaps a mark of retribution. and if we are to unravel this mystery, we must follow the trail wherever it leads, even into the darkest corners of London's high society. As Holmes spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. The case had grown far more sinister than I had anticipated, and the shadows surrounding the silver iris seemed to deepen with every step we took. Yet I knew that with Holmes's brilliance leading the way, the truth, no matter how dark, would ultimately come to light. Chapter 6. A Key to the Puzzle. It was on a particularly frigid morning, as the frost clung to the window panes of 221B Baker Street, that the next piece of the puzzle fell into place. Holmes, having spent the better part of the night poring over the ledger that had mysteriously arrived the day before, now sat with a look of quiet triumph upon his face. His fingers drummed lightly against the arm of his chair, the only outward sign of the inner calculations that were undoubtedly taking place. "Watson," he said at last, breaking the silence, "the hour has come to confront the shadows lurking within this case. The ledger, as you may have surmised, is a veritable map of deceit, pointing us toward the nexus of this conspiracy." "You have deciphered its significance, then?" I asked, setting down the morning paper. "Indeed. Within its pages lie records of financial transactions involving Lord Bentley, Mrs. Moorcroft, and, most intriguingly, Sir Edwin Harper and Dr. Reginald Hawthorne. The sums in question are vast, their origins dubious, and their destinations cloaked in secrecy. These dealings center around the acquisition of rare artifacts, and I suspect something far more perilous." Before I could press him further, Mrs. Hudson entered with a letter. Holmes took it with a nod of thanks, and as he read, his expression grew grave. "This, Watson, is the final confirmation I required," he said, handing the letter to me. It was penned in an elegant yet hurried hand, and bore the signature of Sir Edwin Harper. The contents were cryptic but urgent. "Mr. Holmes, I fear the truth is closing in upon us. The silver iris is more than a symbol. It is a death knell for those who know too much. I beg you, come to my residence at once. I shall explain all." "A plea for aid," I observed. "Do you believe Sir Edwin's fears are genuine?" "Beyond doubt," Holmes replied, rising from his chair. "He is a man accustomed to control, yet his letter reveals desperation. We must not delay." Within the hour we arrived at Sir Edwin's stately home, where a sombre butler led us to the study. Sir Edwin stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, and his posture rigid with tension. He turned as we entered, his face lined with worry. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice heavy. "Thank you for coming. I confess I find myself in a most precarious position." "You fear for your life," Holmes said matter-of-factly. "And with good reason, but before we address your safety, you must tell us everything you know." Sir Edwin hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Several years ago I became involved in a trading company, one that sought to acquire and sell rare artifacts. Among these items was a collection of botanical specimens, including the silver iris. At first it seemed a legitimate enterprise, but I soon discovered that the company was little more than a front for smuggling and extortion. Lord Bentley and Mrs. Moorcroft were also shareholders, though neither was privy to the full extent of the operation." "And Dr. Hawthorne?" Holmes prompted. "He was approached as a consultant, given his expertise in exotic flora," Sir Edwin said. "But I suspect his role went far deeper. He developed a fascination with the silver iris, seeing it not only as a scientific marvel but as a symbol of power. The flower became the centerpiece of the company's dealings, its rarity lending it an air of mystique. But when disputes arose among the shareholders, threats began to surface." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And these threats Did they culminate in action? They did, Sir Edwin said, his voice dropping to a whisper. When Lord Bentley sought to expose the operation, he was silenced. Mrs. Moorcroft, I fear, met the same fate when she attempted to withdraw from the company. And now I am the last remaining link. Holmes regarded him for a long moment. There is one question that remains unanswered, Sir Edwin. Who orchestrates this conspiracy? Sir Edwin's face paled. I cannot say for certain, but there is one name that recurs in the ledger, Graves. He is a shadowy figure, known only to a select few. If anyone holds the answers you seek, it is he. Holmes nodded. Then it is Graves we must pursue, but first we must ensure your safety. Watson, see that Sir Edwin's household staff are placed on alert. I shall return shortly. He departed with his usual briskness, leaving me to organize the precautions. Sir Edwin's butler and footman proved loyal and resourceful, and within an hour the house was as secure as could be managed. Still an air of unease lingered, and I could not shake the feeling that danger loomed. Holmes returned in the evening, his expression one of grim determination. The trail of Graves has led us to the docks, Watson, he announced. But before we proceed, there is one matter to address. Sir Edwin, do you possess any documents or artifacts pertaining to the company? Sir Edwin hesitated, then opened a concealed compartment in his desk. He withdrew a small, ornately carved box and handed it to Holmes. This contains the remaining records, he said. They are incomplete, but may prove useful. Holmes opened the box and examined its contents with meticulous care. Among the papers was a list of names, many of which we recognized as figures from London's elite. But it was a single entry, marked with an asterisk, that caught Holmes's attention. Graves, he murmured. His true name is Jonathan Greaves, and he operates under the guise of a shipping magnate. It appears he is the architect of this entire scheme. Watson, prepare yourself. We shall confront him tonight. Our journey to the docks was fraught with tension. The labyrinthine alleys and looming warehouses seemed to close in around us as we approached our destination. Holmes led the way with unwavering purpose, his steps guided by the trail he had so expertly uncovered. At last we arrived at a dilapidated warehouse, its windows darkened and its doors ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of salt and decay. Holmes motioned for silence as we crept forward, our footsteps muffled by the damp wooden floorboards. In the center of the warehouse, a single lantern cast a dim light over a table strewn with documents. Beside it stood a man of imposing stature, his face obscured by shadow. Holmes stepped into the light, his voice cutting through the silence. "Jonathan Greaves, or should I say Graves, the game is up. You have much to answer for." The man turned slowly, his expression one of cold amusement. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "I had wondered when you might arrive." What followed was a confrontation of words and wits, Holmes's deductions clashing with Greaves's veiled threats. The truth at last began to emerge. The silver iris, the murders, and the financial schemes were all part of a grand design to consolidate power and wealth. But as the tension reached its peak, the sound of footsteps echoed from the shadows, and we found ourselves surrounded. The case was far from over, and the dangers that lay ahead would test us as never before. Chapter 7. The Lure of the Trap. The chilling confrontation at the warehouse had left us both unnerved and resolute. Holmes, ever the master of strategy, had retreated to Baker Street to formulate his next move. It was evident that Jonathan Greaves, the enigmatic architect of the conspiracy, would not be easily ensnared. As we sat in the familiar warmth of our sitting-room, the city outside cloaked in fog, Holmes's face betrayed a rare intensity of thought. "Watson," he began, his voice calm yet edged with purpose. "Our adversary is a man of considerable cunning, but he has made a crucial error. He believes himself beyond the reach of justice. That arrogance, my dear friend, shall be his undoing." "And how do you propose to trap him?" I inquired, eager to see the plan unfold. Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "By exploiting the very symbol he wields so arrogantly, the silver iris. It is both his calling card and his Achilles' heel. We shall create an illusion, Watson, a ruse so compelling that Greaves will have no choice but to reveal himself." Over the next few hours, Holmes outlined his plan with meticulous detail. The newspapers were to carry a carefully planted story, one that would suggest a witness to the murders had come forward and was prepared to provide damning testimony. This fictitious witness, a merchant by the name of James Carter, would be staying at a secluded manor on the outskirts of London, under police protection. It was a gambit fraught with risk, but Holmes was confident that Greaves, desperate to silence any loose ends, would take the bait. By nightfall the trap was set. Lestrade, though initially sceptical, had agreed to assist in the operation. The manor was a derelict property owned by the police, its creaking timbers and overgrown gardens lending it an air of foreboding. Holmes and I arrived under cover of darkness, accompanied by a small contingent of officers who were stationed discreetly around the perimeter. "Watson," Holmes said as we surveyed the scene, "this night may test your mettle as few others have. Are you prepared?" "Always," I replied, though I confess my heart was pounding. We took our positions within the dimly lit drawing-room, where the stage had been set. A figure sat by the fire, his back to the door, the glow of the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. This was our supposed witness, a dummy dressed in a merchant's attire, its silhouette convincing in the dim light. Holmes had gone to great lengths to create the illusion, even scattering a few personal effects around the room to suggest a hasty retreat. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sound the occasional creak of the house settling. My nerves were taut, every creak and rustle from the garden sending a jolt of anticipation through me. Holmes, by contrast, remained as still as a statue, his sharp eyes fixed on the doorway. It was nearing midnight when the moment came. A faint sound, the crunch of gravel beneath cautious footsteps, reached our ears. Holmes's hand tightened on my arm, a silent signal to remain alert. Moments later, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. The man was cloaked in shadow, but there was no mistaking the deliberate, predatory way he moved. He carried himself with the confidence of one accustomed to the shadows, his movements soundless as he approached the figure by the fire. For a moment, he paused as if listening for any sign of disturbance. Satisfied, he drew a blade from his coat and advanced. Holmes acted with lightning speed. In an instant he sprang from his hiding place, his voice ringing out with authority. "Jonathan Greaves, you are caught at last!" The man whirled around, his face contorted in shock and rage. Before he could react further, the room was flooded with light as Lestrade and his officers emerged from their positions, their pistols trained on the intruder. "It's over, Greaves," Lestrade said, stepping forward. "We've got you now." For a moment it seemed as though Greaves might resist. His hand tightened on the blade, his eyes darting toward the nearest window. But the realization of his predicament soon settled over him, and he dropped the weapon with a snarl of frustration. "You've been most thorough, Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But tell me, how did you know I would come?" Holmes's gaze was steely as he replied, "Your actions have been governed by a singular flaw, Mr. Greaves, an insatiable need for control. The moment you believed a witness might compromise your schemes, you could not resist the urge to eliminate them. Your confidence in your own invincibility blinded you to the possibility of deception. Greaves sneered, but said nothing further. He allowed himself to be led away in irons, his silence more telling than any protestation of innocence might have been. As the police secured the scene, Holmes and I lingered in the drawing-room. The fire, now burning low, cast a warm glow over his features, though his expression remained one of quiet contemplation. "It is not often, Watson," he said at last, "that a case resolves itself so neatly, yet I cannot help but feel a lingering unease." "Unease, Holmes?" I echoed. "Greaves has been apprehended, and his conspiracy dismantled. What more remains?" Holmes shook his head. "Greaves was but a part of this web. The silver iris, the murders, the financial schemes, they all point to a network far larger than one man. There are others, Watson, lurking in the shadows, their motives as yet concealed. Tonight we have won a battle, but the war is far from over." As we left the manor and made our way back to Baker Street, I could not shake the feeling that Holmes was right. The night air was heavy with the promise of further revelations, and the mystery of the silver iris seemed more complex than ever. Yet for the moment there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing that justice, however partial, had been served. Holmes, ever the realist, remained vigilant, his mind already turning to the threads that remained untied. And as I looked upon his sharp profile, illuminated by the glow of a gas lamp, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same unyielding determination that had brought us this far. Chapter 8. The Final Flourish. It was late in the afternoon when Holmes and I returned to Baker Street, weary but triumphant. The apprehension of Jonathan Greaves had sent ripples through the criminal underworld, and the papers were already heralding the capture of one of London's most elusive masterminds, yet Holmes, ever the sceptic, seemed less inclined to bask in our success. His sharp features, illuminated by the fading light filtering through the sitting-room window, bore the unmistakable imprint of unfinished business. "Watson," he said, "the capture of Greaves is but the opening move in this grand game. While his machinations have been brought to light, the true depth of this conspiracy remains obscured. The silver iris, its meaning, its significance, has yet to be fully unravelled." "Surely Greaves's capture will unravel the rest," I ventured. "With him in custody, the others involved will have little choice but to scatter." Holmes shook his head. "Scatter, perhaps, but not relinquish their hold. There is one final thread to be followed, one that will lead us to the heart of this dark matter." Before I could inquire further, Mrs. Hudson entered with a sealed envelope. Holmes opened it swiftly, his eyes narrowing as he read. "It is as I feared," he said, handing me the note. It was brief and unsigned, but its meaning was clear. "The iris blooms in shadows. You have cut the stem, but the roots remain. Beware." "A warning," I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. "No, Watson," Holmes corrected, a challenge. "Whoever orchestrates this conspiracy has revealed their hand. They taunt us, knowing full well that we are now too deeply enmeshed to turn back. The time has come to confront them directly." Holmes's deduction led us to an opulent estate on the outskirts of London, one that had remained conspicuously absent from the ledgers and correspondence we had thus far uncovered. It belonged to a certain Sir Percival Gresham, a name whispered among the circles of the elite, but seldom appearing in public record. The estate, surrounded by high hedges and patrolled by watchful guards, bore the hallmarks of secrecy and exclusivity. Holmes and I arrived under the guise of tradesmen delivering a consignment of rare botanical specimens. It was a bold deception, but Holmes had anticipated every detail, from the forged documents to the authentic crates containing harmless orchids. Once inside, we slipped away from the unwitting staff, our path illuminated by the dim light of the estate's gas lamps. "The heart of the operation lies within," Holmes whispered as we crept through the hallways. "This place is no mere residence. It is a fortress for those who wield power behind veils of civility." At last, we reached a grand study, its walls lined with shelves of books and curiosities. In the center stood a mahogany desk, and behind it a figure awaited us. Sir Percival Gresham was a man of indeterminate age, his face smooth and untroubled, his piercing eyes betraying a keen intelligence. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his tone one of amusement, "you have proven most persistent. Few men would dare to venture this far. And fewer still would orchestrate such a web of deceit," Holmes replied, his voice cold and precise. "The silver iris has been your calling card, Sir Percival, a symbol of your influence and a warning to those who oppose you." Sir Percival's lips curled into a faint smile. "A symbol, yes, but it is more than that, Mr. Holmes. The silver iris represents control, order, and the power to shape the course of events. Those who understood its significance were given a choice, to stand with us or be swept aside. And those who refused, Holmes said, met with untimely ends. Lord Bentley, Mrs. Moorcroft, and how many others? They were casualties of their own hubris, Sir Percival said, his tone icy. They sought to undermine what we have built, to expose what must remain hidden. Their fate was inevitable. You speak as though their lives were mere obstacles, Holmes said, his voice sharp. But your empire, Sir Percival, is built on treachery and greed. It ends tonight. Sir Percival's expression darkened. You overestimate your position, Mr. Holmes. Even if you leave this estate alive, you will find that our reach extends far beyond these walls. At that moment, a hidden door opened, and several armed men entered the room. I felt a surge of panic, but Holmes remained calm, his gaze fixed on Sir Percival. Do not mistake caution for cowardice, Holmes said evenly. My presence here is known to the authorities. Even now Lestrade and his men are closing in. Surrender, and perhaps some measure of leniency will be afforded you. Sir Percival hesitated, his confidence faltering for the first time. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the sound of boots on gravel signaled the arrival of the police. Lestrade burst into the room moments later, his pistol drawn. "It's over, Gresham," Lestrade declared. "Your men are subdued, and your secrets will soon see the light of day." Sir Percival, seeing no escape, raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. His calm facade cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "You have won this battle, Mr. Holmes," he said, "but the war is far from over." Holmes said nothing, his eyes cold and unyielding as the man was led away. In the aftermath, as the estate was searched and its secrets laid bare, Holmes and I returned to Baker Street. The case of the silver iris had reached its conclusion, yet the sense of finality eluded me. Holmes, as ever, seemed untroubled by the lingering questions. "Justice, Watson," he said as he lit his pipe, "is seldom absolute. What matters is that those who sought to wield power without accountability have been unmasked. The silver iris, that symbol of their hubris, has been plucked from the shadows." As I watched the smoke curl from his pipe, I could not help but marvel at the brilliance of his mind and the indomitable spirit that had brought us to this moment. The case was closed, but the memory of the silver iris, with its shimmering petals and dark connotations, would linger long in my mind, a testament to the depths of human ambition and the price of its pursuit. The end. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel. Your unwavering support keeps me motivated.